Good evening, everyone. This is the European Parliament event of the Brain Health Day of Brain Week 2026. It's a collaboration between the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies, the European Brain Council, and the European Academy of Neurology. You're all very welcome here this evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Tomas Ryan. I'm a neuroscientist, which is just another way of saying I don't know how the brain works. And none of us do, but this is a wonderful time to be a neuroscientist because of the new methods, because of the new ideas, and because of the young people working in the field. The neuroscientists 100 years ago are going to wish that they were alive today, and if we do our job correctly, the neuroscientists 100 years from now will wish that they were also alive today. This is probably going to be the century of the brain, and the question is whether that happens in Europe or not. And I think it's increasingly clear that we need to consider European research and development as a fundamental part of European competitiveness. And we cannot continue to outsource European competitiveness for research to the USA any more than we can rely on other countries for our own defense. And in the spirit of that view, we're holding a panel that is going to include leading voices from basic discovery neuroscience research, from pharma to neuroscience-inspired artificial intelligence, and the most successful funding models that we've seen in the European Union. So thank you all again for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Lisa Burke.
Thank you so much, Tomas, and welcome everybody to this beautiful room. You've passed hurdle 1, which is getting into the building and getting up to the 12th floor in this room. And it really is an honor to be your host this afternoon for the next 2 hours. I have written many notes, but I'm not going to read them for my introduction because Tomas said everything really in a nutshell. We're here to talk about and think about a European vision for the brain, coordinating research, care and innovation. So lots to talk about, but of course, first of all, I would love to hand over to our MEP here present in the room, our host also today, Angelika Winzig.
Thank you. Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. As a member of the European Parliament, I'm pleased to host this event today in this wonderful location. And it's a special location. The maps are normally not allowed to use this location. Yes, a special welcome to Ms. Leptim, President of the European Research Council. Welcome. And also to Mr. O'Keefe, Nobel Prize winner in physiology or medicine. Some of you may ask, why do I engage on this issue? More than a year ago, around Christmas, my world collapsed. My husband was diagnosed with a mild to moderate Alzheimer's dementia. At first, I wasn't shocked. We had always faced life's challenges together, and I believed that somehow we would manage it. But my husband had always been a very extraordinary athlete, so what can happen? So we tried everything, from language training to therapies using electrodes on the head regions and so on. And also I knew that dementia cannot be reversed. The intensive training seemed to have a little positive effect. But then he had his first fall, and the dark clouds began to fill his mind. He saw dark figures outside the door. He kept asking to go home, even though he was at home already. He refused to let himself be dressed. And every night we ran around the kitchen island for hours until he was completely exhausted. I never felt so helpless in my life. Finding support was incredibly difficult. It took time to find a 24 caregiver. The first one left after 2 weeks. The second had serious problems, mobility problems herself. One night when she was out smoking, my husband left the house, fell 8 meters and ensured to vertebrae. The hospital treated the fall, but struggled to deal with a patient with aggressive dementia and discharged him after 2 days. I was relieved when another hospital agreed to admit him, but the fall had already triggered a delirium, and from that moment it was clear it will be the end. My experience is not unique. Many families across Europe are facing the same reality. That is why strengthening research, both at European and member state level, must be a priority in the key policy decisions ahead, including the next multinational framework, FP10, the European Research Area Act, and the upcoming EU Biotech Act. And the decisions will define how Europe supports scientific excellence, innovation, and technological leadership. I'm therefore very pleased to host today's exhibition here in the European Parliament, which helps to bring the importance of brain health closer to us politicians. I'm also delighted to welcome the Brain Health Mission School Challenge, which engages young people early and connects the next generation with policymakers. Thanks to everybody participating today, and I hope our discussion will help to ensure that brain health is fully reflected in Europe's future research and policy priorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MEP Vinsig, for a very personal testimony. And of course, there are many people in the room who will have such testimonies and experiences. A brain disorder affects 1 in 3 people in our lifetimes, or somebody we love or care about as well. So that is why it is urgent. That is why we're all here to talk about it. And there are many people in the room who have the power to make powerful decisions, hopefully without having to live through such harrowing experiences, not only as the person suffering, but also as the caregiver. And both voices are deeply important. Now, welcome to the stage, President of the European Brain Council, Susan Dixon.
Thank you so much. So I confess to also being a neuroscientist, and I also joined Thomas by not understanding the brain, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here because I'm president of the European Brain Council. If you don't know who we are a policy and advocacy organisation. We've been around over 20 years, and we bring together under one umbrella all stakeholders in the brain space, and all the way from research through to innovation and patient care. We've been hearing many statistics today about the burden of disease. We truly have our work cut out of us. I was about to tell you that 1 in 3 people will live with a neurological disorder at some time in their lifetime, but this statistic has just gone up. 43% of Europeans. We really have a major crisis ahead. There are over 900 known brain disorders, encompassing neurological, psychiatric, mental health conditions. And this brings with it a societal cost burden of over, and this is a modest estimate, 1 trillion euros per year. So as part of this Brain Awareness Week, I'm sure you realise that the European Brain Council joins forces in our event today under this Brain Health Mission with strategic key partners, the European Academy of Neurology and the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies. It's truly an exciting moment. We're really excited about recent policy developments that are giving tremendous momentum to our policy activities and our advocacy work. I just can give you a couple of examples. The European Parliament Public Health Committee is working on reports which will add neurological and mental health strategies to its work programme. And we're seeing the launch of the Brain Health Partnership that kicked off in January 2026 with a budget of 500 million euros over the next decade. And we're working hard in the future at EBC with our partners on an EU coordination plan for the brain. So there's much happening at EBC and bringing the community together. Finally, I just thank you, our MEP, Angelika Vinsig, for making this possible. for hosting this full day of events under the umbrella Brain Health Day, Prevention, Policy and Progress. It's a wonderful venue. Thank you so much for bringing us here. And I'm looking forward to lots of brainy talks and lots of brainy discussions by brainy people. Lisa.
Thank you very much, Susan. And that is absolutely right. We have truly a stellar lineup of speakers this afternoon, and it is a real honor to welcome to the stage 6 for our first panel. And the panel is entitled Boosting Discovery Neuroscience in Driving EU's Competitiveness and Leadership. So please welcome to the stage John O'Keefe, who is a Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine in 2014 and Sainsbury Wellcome Centre. So I'll encourage you to take a seat here. And then we also have Kurt Deketelare, Secretary General of the League of European Research Universities, Leszek Kaczmarek, who is neuroscientist and board member for Neuroscience ERC, Maria Leptin, President of the European Research Council, Paniota Porazzi, Secretary General for the Federation of European Neurosciences Societies, and Yad Shadrang, Head of Neuroscience and Rare Disease Product Development Medicine at Roche. So welcome to all of the panelists. And we have 55 minutes to dig into discovering neuroscience in EU's competitiveness and leadership. So, John, I'm going to start with you, not because you're a Nobel Prize winner, but because you have really lived through a few decades of neuroscience. You've seen the change. So in 3 minutes, can you give a potted history of how you can take the floor? Absolutely, take the floor. It's yours. Give us a history of neuroscience.
Thank you very much.
Briefly. Yes, it will be on. It will be, yes.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. As Lisa said, I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, and I've had the great privilege of being in neuroscience, I guess you could say, right from the beginning, from the infancy of the discipline. In fact, I've been a neuroscientist before they had invented the word neuroscience. And so what I want to do is give you a little bit of a history of my perspective of how neuroscience has grown over these last many, many decades, to give you some sense of how much we know and have learned already, but really how much there is to learn in the future. And I'm part of the reverse brain drain. While all the Europeans were going across the pond to work in America, I came in the opposite direction, and so I've been here for many, many years. So let me start with what neuroscience looked like back in the old days. There was myself. It was a very, very, very cheap, I think, discipline. It was just myself and perhaps a student, and we would make all the equipment ourselves. We would create the mazes ourselves, or we would place electrodes into some part of the rat's brain. I studied mostly the rat. Watch it and try to note down what the rat was doing. And from those types of early days, and with those very simple techniques, we were able to identify what specific cells in the brain were doing. If we were lucky, we could look at it, see how two cells were talking to each other. So we got a little idea of the network. But essentially, all we could really do is look at how single cells worked. Out of that work, we were able to identify which parts of the brain were, in general, doing which things, which parts were sensory, which parts were motor. But we always knew that the way the brain really works is by the interaction of many, many cells with each other. And that's what I want to tell you, is that we are now on the dawn of having the technologies for being able to do that work. We're at the dawn, at the beginning of being able to see how many parts of the brain interact with each other, how networks form, many of the things which we're really interested in, how the brain codes for emotions, how it allows us to navigate in space, and how we can make actions. And the reason that the change has happened is because many people from other disciplines, physics, chemistry, genetics, have come in and helped us to form and build the technologies which will enable us to do that. So for example, we want to record from many cells at the same time. And we have gotten inputs from the computer scientists who actually have built, not only have they given us these wonderful computers to analyze all the data, but they've shown us how to build electrical recording devices where we can record from not just one or two cells as we were stuck with in the past, but from many thousands of cells at the same time. So we can look at not only how each cell is coding for the different things, but the interactions from them. And so what we can see is the emergent properties of how the brain is working. We also have learned from the optical physicists how to image the brain and even a brain in an animal that's going about its business, so that we can actually not only see when the brain cells are active, but which ones they are and how they connect with each other. The geneticists have told us how we can actually use genetics to mark the cells which are involved in, for example, forming a memory. And this is one of the things Thomas has spent much of his life doing. We can see which cells are actually taking part in which memories, and then using another technique, optical activation of cells, where we can put little channels into the cells and which are optically active, so that we can shine lights on the cells and activate the cells that have been active before. So not only can we look at where the memories are, but we can reactivate those memories. So we are now in a position to start doing all these. That's the good news. The bad news is that all of this technology is very expensive. It really comes at a high cost. I used to make electrodes which cost €5. Now, if I want to buy one of these probes, these new electronic probes from IMEC, which is a Belgian company which is helping us do these things, it's going to cost me something like 500 times as much. If I want to do some of the optical activation, I need to have a laser which costs something like €120,000. So it's very expensive. So one of the reasons we need this increase in money is because we are actually on the verge of using these technologies. I'm going to finish with another reason where I'm very optimistic about this, is that some of us have been actually pure scientists all our lives, but we've been able to see that a lot of the things we understand about the brain are now giving us clues about how we might tackle some of the basic neurological diseases. When I got the Nobel Prize in 2014, I knew that there was a saying that when you get the Nobel Prize, that's the end of your scientific career. And many of my friends and a lot more of my enemies came up to me and they said, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life now, John? And I had an answer, because I had already realized that we knew enough about the part of the brain that I'm particularly interested in, the hippocampus and the hippocampal formation, that we could understand what the cells were doing. And it turned out, way after I started to study this part of the brain, because I was really interested in it, it turned out that this is the part of the brain where Alzheimer's toxicity begins in the entorhinal cortex. So I said, oh, this is too good to be true. We know what the cells do. So if we can produce transgenic animals which actually mimic some of the aspects of Alzheimer's disease, or if we can use our understanding about how this part of the brain is involved in spatial navigation awareness, maybe we can create psychological tests for the earliest signs of Alzheimer's disease. We haven't done it yet, but we're on the road, I think. And I think that's an example of how some of the basic research that we've been doing for many, many years is now putting us in a position. I'm not unique. I think we're in a position now to start applying a lot of these techniques and ideas to sort of make, one doesn't promise you're going to have cures, but to start to make some inroads into our understanding of Alzheimer's. So I would really advocate for this increase in funding, because I think it's a time in which that increase in funding will actually be used very appropriately and timely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much indeed. And I'm glad I did not interrupt you, because I think there's no better advertisement for the need for money than you, in fact. I just wanted to ask you very briefly just a couple of things. You told us that you were looking from 1 to 2 cells, how they were interacting, to now complex networks. And of course, we're going to talk about AI in a moment. So complex networks is one of the things. Also, interdisciplinary nature of research was another thing that you mentioned. All of these disciplines coming together. Do you ever think that with so much data having to be analyzed and looked at, patterns probably looked at, probably through things like AI and machine learning, do you think that level of data can cloud conceptual thinking?
I could, if you don't come about it the right way. So we use AI, we use all of these techniques in the lab now. For example, I didn't mention it, but I said in the beginning, I used to just watch the animal and write down what it was doing. Now, of course, using pose analysis, we can actually take frames and pictures of videos of the animal and actually extract the information about what the animal's behavior actually is. So we have gone from a very
you have to explain what pose analysis is, because not everybody here is a scientist.
Sorry. So it's you just take a picture of the animal and then you use AI to extract where the various parts of the limbs are, and then you look at the next frame and see what's moved, so that you can actually say how the animal has moved, what it's doing, how it's importantly interacting with other animals. So we use AI and then we use it but we never ever let it take over. We always think that the most important thing is to have a hypothesis, to actually test the hypothesis. And we always try to keep an arm's length from AI so that it doesn't interfere with our interpretation of the data.
Well, I'm going to move right now to the lady on the panel who knows everything about AI, and that's Jutta. You are Secretary General of the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies, but you work in AI, again, interdisciplinary in nature. And I mean, first of all, I just want you to lay out the landscape of where we are now, because when we think about AI in Europe, we think, oh God, we're behind. We're behind 2 different parts of the world. Is there anywhere with AI and brain health that Europe could lead?
Thank you very much, Lisa. I hope this is working. Yeah. Actually, I think we are right now at a critical crossroad with respect to both neuroscience and artificial intelligence, and we can see that through our everyday lives. And the next frontier that is coming up and where Europe could be the leader is neuro-inspired AI. And let me explain why. First of all, because of ethics of AI. You are now witnessing the use of AI in warfare, in autonomous drones, right? Already in the conflict in Iran. And we really know that this technology is not yet ready for this kind of life and death decisions. These systems do not have any morality. They don't have any ethics. They cannot tell apart a war crime from a military order, let's say. If we want to incorporate ethics and morality into AI, we have to look at the system that have solved this problem in the best possible way. Well, can actually be arguable, but let's say the human brain has managed to understand what is important and what is ethical and whatnot. So if we fund neuroscience at the time when AI is on the rise, this is actually critical for securing the safety of the human race of Europe. That's one reason. Another important reason is that current AI systems are very data and energy hungry, putting a very high burden on the resources of the planet as well as our environment. You know that big industries are now building new data centers, and they're using tons of energy to cool them so that AI can be trained on this massive amount of data. The brain, on the other hand, is like less than 2 kilos, and it's running with the energy of a light bulb, less than 20 watts. So the brain is extremely efficient, and yet it still outperforms current AI systems in a lot of tasks, including reasoning, abstraction, generalization. So again, to solve this problem, we need to look at the brain and get inspiration so that you can build AI systems that are more efficient and more sustainable. And we have already reached the limit where AI can scale up and become smarter and better. We now need to look at the brain in order to make systems that are as advanced and as efficient as the brain. And maybe last but not least, I can also say that AI is already a major player in medicine, in healthcare, and we've seen systems already that are used to help people with Parkinson's, for example, control their symptoms, or people without limbs regulate via thinking their actions. And this is not science fiction. It's already done in laboratories in Europe and even in our hospitals. And the better these systems get, the closer they get to the human brain, the more accurate they can be, and they can help us deal with the high increase of neurological and neurodegenerative diseases that we have discussed. And Europe can be the leader, and this is the right time, mostly because the US, which has been a key player, is now retreating due to war conflict and also due to serious budgetary cuts in science. And we've seen it with a lot of the people from the US that are now trying to return to Europe to do their research. And ERC, in fact, is capitalizing on this talent with their new scheme. So this is the right time for Europe to invest, and to invest in the interface of neuroscience and AI. So the next frontier, which would be the neuro-inspired artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Jutta. And while we were waiting to get into the building, we had time to chat, which was wonderful. And it's absolutely wonderful to have you as a female also working in AI, because we were talking about the biases that exist in AI. They are already present. And of course, if Europe hasn't got a voice in the market, there will be other types of biases. So if Europe underfunds discovery neuroscience, for example, over the next 10 years, what could we lose in Europe that is irreplaceable?
What could we lose in Europe?
In your work realm, not in general.
Certainly talent that is already moving away to industry. You know, industry is right now the big player in terms of leading the neuro AI revolution, and it's not European industry, unfortunately. So we need to find a way to retain this talent. And a major way of doing it is obviously funding neuroscience inspired AI. Technology, because all this talent is generating new technology that is going to take the next step, let's say, in medicine, as well as in research. Obviously, female talent, for sure, because we already have a shortage of females that are interested in working in traditionally male-dominated fields, including AI, computer science, engineering. So that's another place where Europe can contribute by leading the way. These are just a few examples.
Thank you, Jutta. I'm going to move to Jan next, actually, Head of Neuroscience and Rare Diseases at Roche. And thank you also for being one of the sponsors of the day. Now, how did you get here? What was it that you used to find out where this was?
So thank you. So thanks. It's great to be part of this great panel. It's a super topic. So I'm very passionate about brain health and its opportunities. So I was invited to provide a few perspectives from Big Pharma, and why it's so exciting to be invested and investing in neuroscience, in neurology, and what we simply now call a new renaissance, or the neuro renaissance. There has been decades of frustration, of failures, of large investments across many of the big pharma groups, and they have, most of them, pulled away from neurology research and investing. But with the breakthrough of basic neuroscience, and with the avenue of new methodology, with the avenue of AI and new data science, we are at the cusp of really a step change in innovation and breakthrough that will translate into new medicines in the future. So if you look around, most of the big pharma companies all went back in investing into neurology in the last 1-2 years. There's hardly any one of the big 10 that is not returning into this. So from a age of neuro pessimism, it's back to an age of neuro optimism. And a strong focus, of course, are the neurodegenerative disorders. Not only do we understand the biology much better, we are now also able to earlier detect them with just a recent avenue of blood-based biomarkers to diagnose or rule in or rule out a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. That was total science fiction a few years ago, and this is just the beginning. We are generating more and more markers of disease progression, of activity. We better understand the interplay of inflammatory processes and neurodegenerative processes. And as we also learn from other disease areas, cardiometabolic health, liver health, we are reminded back what the Romans always said, mens sana in corpore sano. It's one health, it's all interconnected. So the message here is, yes, there's a huge comeback of neurology in the pharma industry. There's also a huge appetite to work with startups and to bring in innovation from outside the companies. The whole pharma sector by 2028 will face a gigantic patent cliff of about 300 billion in revenue loss. And they're all very eager to replace this and very open-minded to also adopt innovation that comes from startups or basic labs. And maybe and I think I shared this with Thomas, that we can also learn from good examples in the US. So let's say the opposition of academia and industry, I think we need to overcome this as Europeans. We need to also teach the younger generation of neuroscientists how to become an entrepreneur. Most academic top institutions in the US have a mandate to create startups, right? And to work and to apply the science they generate. So I think we have a huge opportunity if we combine the brain capital that we have in Europe, that we also can take this opportunity not only to reduce the burden due to our demography that is now facing every nation in the world with just becoming older and having more neurodegenerative disorders, but also create an opportunity for positive brain economy and new entrepreneurship. So message is neuro renaissance, optimism, and it's totally worth to invest in every level.
Thank you, Jan. Just thinking about what you've just said about if academic centers in Europe could create the startup culture, which could accelerate lab to product results, they're still, of course, beholden to the stringent medical timelines, which are long periods of time for development. And in Europe, we often talk about the seed funding, stage 1, stage 2. It's not there. So at what point could Roche step in? At what point would you be happy to step in with a startup?
It's very flexible. It can start from basic pre-human stages to the more evidence you have, the more compelling, but the more expensive it gets. So it really depends at which level. And there's most major companies have venture foundations and supports startups, but that's maybe also to think out of the box as European Academic Consortium. Maybe the academic consortium could create a business-like startup culture, for instance, and help with venture funding. What I learned, and I'm reminded about a great quote of the gallerist of Pablo Picasso. She said, "There's always enough money. It only changes pockets." And we need to learn how to attract the capital that exists. I mean, if you just think many people from Dubai now move to Mallorca, there's plenty of money to invest. So we just have to be smart and not just rely on big pharma, but maybe work with big pharma, learn from them, learn from the US universities, how they created their own startup infrastructure and take it from there.
Thank you.
But it's possible at any stage.
And of course, money can be leveraged in different ways as well. It can be played with in all sorts of different ways. But you mentioned thinking outside of the box. I'm going to turn to Kurt now, actually, Secretary General for the League of European Research Universities, to really just reply to what Jan has put out there as a concept, coordination and various other things about how the academic institutions could work together and coordinate better.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you for the invitation here. Well, certainly coming back to the remarks made, it's clear that, well, perhaps there's a little bit, I would say, a wrong view on that not enough universities are already doing that. If I look in my own group, 24 leading research intensive universities in Europe, all of them have a really well-developed startup policy, innovation policy, spin-out policy, and things like that. It's clear that many more universities out there in Europe should do that, should embark on that trajectory. And I think that with the stimuli that the European Commission is now introducing, with the innovation policy of this Commission, with the Innovation Act, which hopefully is going to be on the table very soon, these are all very good initiatives, stimuli to get on that trajectory. Only one remark that I would like to make is it's easy to refer to the United States, but obviously the legal, financial, fiscal framework in which we function in Europe as universities who want to embark on this innovation pathway is of course completely different. And what has been put on the table today by the Commission, the 28 regime, I still should have a closer look at it tonight or tomorrow, but obviously we have to come to a kind of harmonization of those 27 national legal frameworks that we have on legal stuff, creation of companies, corporate legislation, tax legislation, social security, labor law, and things like that. And then, of course, we will get into a similar position as we see in the United States, where this trajectory from the university to companies, to products, to impact in general is much faster. It's clear that we do a lot of good things at the beginning, at the startup phase. We, of course, miss out in the scaling up. So it's a question of making sure that the right environment is created in Europe to make sure that we can move on with those startups to the next phases in the development of products and companies. And it's clear that, coming back to Lisa's question, that cooperation there is obviously absolutely key. I think it's already a long time behind us to think that even top universities can do everything alone. No, they cannot do everything alone. So it's a question of making sure that we join forces and that this joining of forces is also facilitated by the regulatory framework in which we have to act. By coincidence, this noon, I had a long chat with colleagues on European university alliances. Well, obviously, there is a huge desire to cooperate, to collaborate, but obviously the legal framework in the different member states of the Union that we have are big obstacles. And that's why, if I just can mention that also here today, that's why there is an enormous need and an urgent need that the Commission comes up, and they have promised to do that later this year in the fall, with what is called the ERA Act, the European Research Area Act, a legal initiative which is going to put forward once and for all the legal framework within which we are going to make sure that this fifth freedom, the free circulation of knowledge, the free circulation of researchers, the free collaboration with companies, with other actors in the European Union, is finally going to be created. And so, coming back to a number of remarks made earlier, 2026 is going to be an absolutely crucial year for the future development of RNI in Europe. Not only because of the fact that I hope that by the end of this year, we will have a deal with the 27 member states on what will be FP10, but also because 2026 is going to be a crucial year for all kinds of accompanying legislative frameworks. The 28 regime today, very soon, hopefully, the European Innovation Act, later this year, the European Research Area Act. If we can realize all of that, and I'm looking at the member of the European Parliament sitting here in front of me, if we can realize all of that, that will mean that the environment within which we are doing research, innovation, also education in Europe is fundamentally going to change. And this will hopefully, at the end of the day, facilitate stronger, faster, and even better research and innovation than we are doing today.
Thank you very much. I think it's all, I can feel when applause is almost bubbling up in the room. I wanted, you said that research might be changing fundamentally. Are we thinking about brain science too narrowly. If we are thinking of it just as healthcare, we also had Jutta mention our sovereignty here in Europe. We've had the word resilience mentioned. We've had the word defense mentioned as well. I mean, brain health is quite a broad topic. Should it only be under healthcare, or could it be thought about in broader terms? Do you have these discussions with the 24 research universities?
Absolutely, we have them, because obviously we are now in an era where we have to see and where we finally realize that many of the things that we are doing obviously can function in a different way depending on the environment in which they are used. And that brings us to the whole discussion on dual use, for example, dual use research. That brings us to the discussion today, defense research.
It also brings us to money, because we know the European countries are moving towards 5% for defense spending.
Absolutely. And so that means that we, not only for brain research, but for many other topics of research out there, we should look at them from a very broad and diverse perspective, namely what can be done from a civilian approach on those topics, what can be done from a dual use approach on those topics, and even, as you say, the 5% target is there from a defense research perspective. And with LERU, we are, of course, well, obviously, like all universities in Europe, we are, of course, struggling to a certain extent because we have been now 4 decades behind us of framework programs, which had an exclusive civilian approach. Now we see that dual use is, well, we have to admit, unavoidable in a sense that much of what we do potentially has civilian and military applications, which is not necessarily bad. And it can also work in the other way around, from military to civilian. So we have very nice examples of that. What we say at the end of the day, at this point in time, because we also look at the European Commission for what is going to be the legal framework on those very important issues, we say that we are prepared to accept the dual use approach in the framework program, but only under the condition if that is going together with the introduction of a number of important safeguards. Safeguards for our institutions, safeguards for our researchers, so that at the end of the day, that ethical, legal, personal considerations are respected, that nobody is forced to get into dual use or even military research, that the condition or that dual use or military application cannot be a condition for funding and things like that. So we are very much aware of the very diverse reality which is out there today, which we're absolutely not going to deny, but we want this to be accompanied with a number of safeguards. And last point, I would say, it's out of the question that the framework program itself is going to fund pure military research. This is for the European Defence Fund. If this European Defence Fund is integrated in the European Competitiveness Fund, okay, we will take note of that. But then, of course, the European Competitiveness Fund will need a much better legal and political framework than it is having at this point in time. Because as a lawyer, I can tell you, Lisa, this has been one of the worst pieces of draft EU legislation that ever has been presented by the European Commission. Just to be clear on that point, I will repeat that if you want that.
No. We're going to move on.
It's clear that this is one of the worst pieces of legislation which urgently need a rewrite through the members of the European Parliament.
Well, moving it back to brain health. Thank you. The point is made brilliantly by a brilliant lawyer. We're going to go to Maria now. Maria Leptin, you are the president of the European Research Council. I have one quick question for you. Does the funding structure work?
I think the funding structure works brilliantly. You see it here. John is a grantee.
You've got the best of the best next to you here.
But that's what the European Research Council funds. It is the best of the best. And we see the results. So if that was your brief question, that's the brief answer. But I can, of course, go on and comment a lot more.
Okay, let me expand the question then. There are many brilliant minds, not at the most elite institutions, but still brilliant minds who spend an awful lot of time writing grants. Yes, they're helped by AI. And actually, Jutta and I were talking earlier that she can even see when grants are written by AI, etc. Which is, there's another problem as well, which is now there's been a brain drain from the US coming back in. And again, Jutta told me about some of the statistics, there are more people applying for the same amount of money. So there are different pressures on the system right now. But let's go back to my first point, which is that a lot of people spend a lot of time writing and not winning these grants.
Well, that's in the nature of competition. So that is, and so let's take a couple of steps back. So the European research programs are always asked to have, an added dimension, an added value for Europe. And the added value for Europe is precisely the competition. It is because every researcher in Europe who thinks about applying to the ERC thinks a lot harder because they know they're entering this, or at least they should. Some don't, and we don't only get good grants from very good people. But that is the added value that we create a Champions League, not we. I can't take any credit for this. The ERC creates a Champions League. And by the way, and that is often questioned, the fundamental aspect of it is questioned. We heard the importance of industry for health. We heard, it's not only healthcare. So if I go back to what John said, he actually made all the points of why it's so important to have an ERC. He talked about his early research. He didn't care at that point as to whether all 10 big pharmas are now neuro-optimistic. Is that the word you used? Oh, great word. And have returned to reinvesting in neuro. He didn't think about that when he was poking his homemade electrodes into rat brains. He just wanted to understand. And the ERC funds that. And as a result of that and other people who were doing that, we have the optimism, we have the healthcare being able to exploit that. He also made other important points. He mentioned technologies, he mentioned computer scientists, physicists who developed the microscopes, computer scientists who helped interpret the data, geneticists who developed the understanding of the underlying processes and developed the genetic tools like optogenetics. All of these people, none of these were thinking of curing Alzheimer. They were only thinking of John's exciting experiments and the way they could help, not only John's, also other people's. So first of all, understanding only. Second, the transdisciplinarity, the interdisciplinarity, the funding of people who are just burning to solve problems. And finally, he said, it's expensive. And yes, and so the ERC provides funding for well-argued proposals that are expensive, and it provides money, and it lets those people who come up with these ideas, who have a vision, it then leaves them alone for 5 years to pursue what they want to pursue. And if we want to get back to industry, many of them, even though they're funded for understanding, for doing what John did, for doing what Jutta does, for doing what our AI nerds do, it provides them for the money that then leads to, guess what, innovation. The largest proportion of the transition grants that are funded through the European Innovation Council, the research comes from the ERC for people who were funded for following their curiosity.
You've outlined a couple of things there. You've said that the ERC grants go to research that is of benefit for Europe, but it's hard to know what is of benefit when you also outlined the brilliant fundamental research. So how do you make that choice when you're looking at brilliant fundamental researchers thinking about handing out these grants when you simply cannot know the pipeline to the future benefits?
That is the exact point. We don't know it. And I can tell you who knows even less about it, and that's the politicians. I have the greatest respect for politicians, and I'm really thrilled that you're here today and want to hear this. But the people who know what the interesting problems are those who work at the forefront. I don't know. I don't know. I recognize it in my own field when I see grantees coming to do their interviews. I think, oh, wow, I can recognize that's great. I couldn't have had that idea. So we have to trust them. And that's been the recipe. We trusted John. We trusted all the others. That's one point. The other point is we don't know now what we will need tomorrow. Yes, we've come around to recognizing that we need to fund AI, that we need to invest in AI factories, but we didn't know this 5 years ago. And, you know, it's too late now to fund that. We have to fund the next generation. So the point really about the pipeline, we all agree it's great. We agree that we have to stick fundamental knowledge in the beginning of the pipeline so that we get innovation at the end. But we don't know what pipeline will need to be fed tomorrow. So we mustn't create just the input for the pipeline. We have to create a huge pool of knowledge into which somebody else can dip a pipeline tomorrow, in a year, in 5 years' time, and in 20 years' time. And that's what's happening also now.
A lot of people would want 5 minutes of your time for various questions. What is the biggest negative question you get asked?
You know, I'm an optimist. I don't hear negative questions.
This is fabulous. We've got
No,
optimism
but
twice
I
on
mean,
the panel.
obviously, I have just given the defense line against the negative line. We don't need to pay for, you know, fundamental science. We know everything we need to know. That may even be true about cancer. It is certainly not true about the brain. So we don't know what we don't know. And so we need to keep an open mind.
Well, that's a very interesting point because the groups of many different cancers came together to operate as under one umbrella. And that's sort of what's happening with brain health now as well. The various
exactly.
pillars
We've
of
heard
brain
many
health.
examples of why that's so important.
And Leszek, last but not least on the panel, I've got a keen eye on the time as well, because I know we started late. Now, you're a neuroscientist and board member for neuroscience at the ERC. What frontier research could the EU lead on?
Thank you very much also for the invitation and all of you for coming. It's been mentioned actually, you know, that we shall stress this, that ERC is not about funding fundamental research. ERC is about funding frontier research. It funds research proposals that go beyond the current frontier of knowledge. Yes, let it be something to diagnose this disorder, or even propose a mechanism, understand mechanism and propose a cure. That's very important, we've heard. But it's also about very fundamental things. So let me, again, I think we should stress more and more this example of the AI, because if you look now about origins of AI, to great extent, artificial intelligence has been inspired by NI, which is natural intelligence, yes? A long time ago, it was called artificial neural networks. When David Hubel and Thorsten Wiesel were discovering how the neurons in the visual cortex respond to the visual signals, they didn't think about the algorithms that will change the current world. And this is what happened. And the same goes to two colleagues who shared the Nobel Prize with John O'Keefe, Maybrit Moser and Bart Moser, when they described so-called grid cells in the entorhinal cortex John mentioned, part of the brain that are responsible for mapping environment, more or less. Now, actually, for this panel, I looked for the slogan, grid cells and AI, and got a response from an AI in the internet that is a branch of an AI called grid cells inspired AI. That's a frontier. So the frontier, Maria says that we know our fields and we can recognize when we listen, when we read the proposals, when we read the papers, that something is absolutely novel, something that is groundbreaking. But the whole thing about ERC in particular, which is, sorry to say, the most successful part of the EU funding, because it's unrestricted, because it's bottom up. So we cannot predict the frontier. we have to, like I said, create a pool of knowledge and someone will pick up. But to do excellent research. One more flash example, I would say. So Yara was saying about this energetic cost. I looked into this. There is an AI factory built by Microsoft in the US, 300 megawatts of power constant use, which I look, the power plant, coal power plant will use 1 million ton of coal a year to support this AI factory. NI, this 1.5 kilogram, whatever, uses 20, equivalent of 20 kilogram of coal. And this is one of the greatest frontiers, how to really use this knowledge, extending our knowledge on the brain to do this kind of progress like AI, which we are both happy and afraid of.
Another word that was in the title of this discussion is the word competitiveness. So how do you see Europe globally in a competitive landscape?
I think, okay, my son, private note, my son works for VC, venture capital, in London.
That's very useful for you.
He's developing still. Anyway, in quantum technologies, okay? So he sent me recently, we discussed a lot of those issues, sent me a very interesting numbers, how different countries are excelling in the basic discoveries and then in the application, all the way to the market product, okay? And the truth is, I'm saying, a country like Italy is one of the very top in terms of excelling in the basic research, but it's entirely gone when it goes to the market. We discussed this. That's a problem. We are lucky with the ERC that we, Scientific Council, we do our own regulation. And our main job is to make the work of scientists we select as easy as possible. That's something we are preoccupied with. So I would just wish that the politicians in Europe, we also think like that this is the main job, to make the life easier also for researchers, because this is the problem which we are having. Too much of regulation, too fragmented market, that's a problem.
Thank you very much. Well, on that lovely line, make life easier for the researchers. Please, a huge thanks to our wonderful panel. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm now going to call up the next panel, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay, sorry. So I've just had a note to say that MEP Nikos Papandreou needs to join this panel as well because he needs to leave. So I will invite our MEP Nikos Papandreou to the panel straight away. Thank you very, very much. And I will also invite up all of the other members of the panel. And the title of this panel is Addressing the Unmet Needs and the Burden of Disease. So please welcome Arabella Acalinai, Gianpiero Cavalieri, Isaac Middleman, and Scott Vocolo. So thank you very much. I know you're a very busy man, so I'm going to allow you to speak first because I know you're going to give some notes on the next panel. It'll be on already.
Hello, thank you very much. So being a politician, I guess I can talk about anything. I'm switching from the
limits.
some limits, of course, so I'm not going to talk too much. I just want to make a comment that the previous head of the research said about not knowing what we don't know, which sounds like an Aristotelian idea. That's the problem with this idea of making our new budget performance oriented and competitive, because what does it mean? What will the output be? Does the research have to say this will help people with cancer? Maybe, maybe not. It should still be funded, especially basic research. So that's why I'm a little bit worried about the KPIs that are being involved in the new budget. In our health committee, which I'm a member of, and there's another member here, MEP Viganin, our battle is to increase the funding for health. That's our big question. Now, in terms of, I won't go over the issues. In terms of health, brain health, well, actually, that's a term I didn't know before I came to Parliament. And when I looked it up, there's a lot of people didn't know, because the term really became popular in about 2011, 2017. I always thought mental health, I had broken it down into what we call here today silos. So brain health is, for me, very good branding for a politician. That's an awful word, but how we support it, because you instantly understand what it's talking about. Our role is to have your input, and I heard some nice remarks about politicians, some nice, some not so nice, is to use your expertise to help us form the policy. I have no expertise on what we're talking about except what we can read in the general literature, but we do need your help to form the policy. And in that case, following that, I'm actually organizing 3 events this year on brain health, showing the commitment. One is about improving early diagnosis. I'll just say the basic titles, just so you know, and I really would like your help and participation. The other is, I'm not so organized, you can see here. The other is towards coordinated policy action in brain health. That's exactly what we should be doing at the end of this term. And science at speed, from biomarkers to breakthrough therapies. So these are the titles of what I'm going to promote and host with your help. So I think that's my basic introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If you need to dash,
No, I could now.
okay. You can dash at any point. Because we're very happy that you're operating for the masses here and doing the work of the masses here. So if you need to dash and do something good for this environment here, we'd be delighted with that. So I'm going to move to firstly, actually, Giampiero, and we're going to talk about epilepsy. In fact, it's one of the most common neurological disorders, and still lots of unmet needs and treatments, that it's still unmet from the point of view of science. And I want to talk about IGAP, the Intersectoral Global Action Plan on Epilepsy and other neurological disorders. So tell us about the strategy that we have right now and how could it be made better?
So I'm a geneticist by trade. I work with human genomic data to try and find the cause of disease where it's a monogenic cause.
I just have to interrupt you because you have this such beautiful Giampiero Italian name and a wonderful Irish accent.
That's a long story. I don't think we have 3 minutes for it. But yeah, we try and find genetic cause of disease. And with the epilepsies, we now understand because of genetics, there are hundreds of different genes that are involved. And if you understand the cause at a genetic level, sometimes there are existing therapies that can be applied in a very precise ways, or you have a platform to develop new therapies. But all of this is really about pattern recognition. And increasingly, we just need very, very large data sets to be able to do this.
Well, lucky you, they're coming your way today, aren't they? Large data sets.
Well, they are. But I think, the opportunities for Europe are really to enable this through very good, robust infrastructure. And the Commission is already investing in the Genomic Data Infrastructure Program, which very briefly is allowing each nation to create a national database and then to federate an analysis across those different national databases to allow you connect genomic data from people across Europe.
On that point, is there any regulation that makes that difficult?
So, and this is another opportunity I would highlight here. So we have the General Data Protection Regulation, which is designed here in this building to enable research. Now, sometimes it ends up blocking, and that's largely down to the interpretation at a national or an institutional level. So one of my messages to the MEPs would be to really give strong guidance to ensure that this GDPR legislation enables research, because the risk otherwise is it ends up blocking. And then Tomas's quote earlier was whether that happens in Europe or not, whether the discoveries happen here or not, in my field is largely dependent on the ability to access and share data, which in legislative terms is GDPR.
Now, I mentioned your Irish accent. You're based in Ireland, and Ireland's about to hold the presidency of the EU Council from July onwards. What kind of perspectives can research in Ireland help when this presidency comes along?
So one of the things I'd love to see highlighted in the Irish presidency is the implementation of the European Health Data Space, which of course is another great enabler in theory for research. Like in my field, data science, it's by far the biggest change that we could have, because all of a sudden there's vast amounts of data that are made available. But that brings risks, from a citizen perspective or a patient perspective. You could be like, oh, all of this data be made available without consent. So it's important to have very strong governance around the European health data space. And from an Irish perspective, I think we're strong in public and patient involvement. So what I'd love to see Ireland leading is getting the patient voice into how we implement the European health data space in Ireland, so that you've got strong governance and public trust in who is accessing the data, how, and ensuring maximum impact and sustainability.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Arabella next, because in fact, when we were just briefly talking before this panel, you had the phrase, and you underlined the phrase to me, expert patients. And we can sit here and we can talk about research, we can talk about brain health, we can talk about the testimonies from the caregiver's point of view, but it is the patient themselves who, I mean, it's almost ironic that we use the phrase expert patients, because they are the ones living with whatever they are living. So can you share a few examples of the reality of the costs, the barriers, the challenges faced by these expert patients?
Yes, but first I will, first of all, I would say that I am a patient living with a neurological condition, Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, which is a genetic progressive neuropathy. But I'm also mother of two boys who inherited my disease, so I'm also a caregiver for them. And my oldest son lives with epilepsy as well. And I would really want just for a moment to start with an imagination exercise, let's say, because, you know, as I completely agree that research and, you know, science is amazing. I really like it and I really love it. Even if I'm not an expert in the field, I do understand the human curiosity on how brain works, how neurological conditions and so on. But then could you please imagine for 1 second that any of you in this room at one point in life can become a patient yourself or a caregiver for someone you love. And then suddenly, all of the sudden, and let's say sadly, you will face the reality of a life with a neurological condition and all the barriers that comes, you know, because in theory, we have so many solutions for our problems. But as I said this morning, still Europe is still very fragmented, unfortunately. And not all the patients in Europe, not all neurological patients get the same support, the same standard of care they would deserve, they would need. And yes, coming back to the burdens and yes, well, we do face delayed diagnostic. And we are speaking so much about diagnosis odyssey, which is a real burden, not only for the patients, but for the family as well. And sometimes even for the specialists, because they are really struggling to find the right disease, you know, that a patient has. And then we have, as I said, fragmented care pathways, which it is a cruel reality in some Eastern European countries, unfortunately. Then we are speaking so much about transition. So we see that children with neurological conditions, most of the time they get that multidisciplinary team and management of the disease they need. But let me tell you, in Romania, sometimes we don't even have a transfer. Not speaking about transition, because transition is a whole process that I know it is a challenge, because inside EuroNMD, inside the reference network, we are discussing it a lot and trying to get solutions for the transition, you know. Patients become sort of lost in the system. I myself, I don't have a multidisciplinary team taking care of my condition. I am sort of an expert patient in the sense that I learned a lot about my condition, and I do have access to top experts on CMT. But still, this is not something that really helps me. And then we have limited access to specialized services and to rehabilitation services. And yes, something that I actually forgot this morning, neurorehabilitation. What about patients living with stroke and trying to get back their health after such a condition? How do they deal with it? Because we are speaking about timely access to such services. So we do have a lot of problems, and I really think that we need to address them at the EU level, and to make sure that we coordinate the actions and we kind of encourage the member states to implement them in a proper way. Thank you.
Arabella. Thank you also for your testimony. Really, the testimonies are almost the strongest voices here, and the voice of patients are, as you've underlined so well, extremely important. Isaac, you've worked across many different groups, really. You've seen different ecosystems, how they operate together. We've just heard from Arabella there that brain health is really a strategic priority for Europe. It's societal and economic burdens as well. And again, because you've worked in terms of money across the various ecosystems, I think you have ideas for new finance models that could help. And you've also seen where the bottlenecks are.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Really appreciate it. So indeed, I think sometimes, and we heard it in the earlier panel as well, sometimes there's a contrast made, to put it very basically, between should we be funding with more money and more resources the fundamental research, or does Europe really need to focus on the translation and the delivery to patients of that research at scale in the form of innovation? And it's a natural, obvious debate to have, but I'm going to be somewhat bold and hopefully a little provocative here by saying that I think it's to somewhat misstate the nature of the problem. The truth is that fundamental clinical and academic research is, of course, absolutely essential to both the pursuit of the understanding of our world and our bodies and how those things can go wrong, and of course also to maintaining an academic environment in Europe that is truly world-leading, which we have the advantage of having. When it comes to the translation to market and ultimately to providing solutions to patients, though, this is where I don't think the conversation should so much be about how we spend public money, but rather how we create incentives to pull that fundamental research in the form of innovation towards the market and towards patients at scale. And that's about working with, and we heard in the earlier panel and here again today, in this panel as well, we're going to hear from industry players, from investors, and from others. But there are also some levers that we can play with in the European ecosystem that play to our strengths. And that includes the belief that we have here that's becoming more and more unique, it would seem, around the world, that health is fundamentally a public good. That's ultimately about the contract between the citizen and society and the state, as it were. That gives us control through things like novel pricing approaches, outcome-based payments, social impact bonds, and the like, of novel ways of financing the delivery to market and to patients at scale of the innovation that's the product of the research that we produce in clinics and in academic research around Europe. So let's play to the strength that we have, which is the belief in the importance of these questions. But having agreed that that is essential, let's really think innovatively about how we can create a suction effect from private funding, investors and industry and alike, but also from new ways of looking at what the value that is created by this health innovation to society as a whole is. And if we create a novel understanding of understanding the value of that innovation, the innovation will be naturally pulled across the European ecosystem to the market and towards patients.
Thank you, Isaac. And just to underline as well, because I'm not sure I said, you're president of Resonance Health Europe. Scott, you are the executive director for worldwide medical neuroscience at Bristol Myers Squibb. Just asking you a couple of things, really. An EU coordination plan. Again, this is a word of the afternoon: coordination, how to close gaps for care pathways, and also just adding into that, what should an EU brain health plan prioritize to give a real life course approach? Because as Isaac just said, brain health, our health in general, that should be for societal good. And ultimately, it makes life cheaper in the long run.
Well said. Well said. I will say, thank you for the question, by the way. I will say I was a researcher for quite a long time before jumping ship to academia. I'm sorry, to industry. And so what was clear was that we have made strides over the last 3 decades in a lot of areas of brain science, whether it's schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, Alzheimer's disease, what I'm most familiar with, or others as well. Neurotransmitter circuitry has been elucidated a lot better in the last 30 years or so. We know a lot more about Alzheimer's disease, but there do remain some gaps. And essentially, I would say there are three that come to mind, whether in the EU or elsewhere. First and foremost, we would need to kind of make sure, and it's been brought up before by other panelists, that patients are treated or are diagnosed early and treated early. There are several diseases that actually delaying treatment will lead to direct worse outcomes for people with, say, psychosis and schizophrenia. So early diagnosis and treatment is paramount. The second thing would be a continuum of care, and I think Arabelle mentioned that just a minute ago. Whether you're transitioning from, say, a young person to your elderly, to your middle ages and elderly, or you're leaving the hospital, maintaining care along your lifetime, because many of these maladies are lifelong. They don't go away. They don't have cures, is really important. And making sure that you continue to check in with doctors, especially considering a lot of the psychiatric disorders come with a kind of sense that I don't have this disease, or I'm not affected by this disease. And so that plays a big role. And I suppose lastly, I would say that there's a definite need for an infrastructure to assure that drugs can be submitted, approved, and made available to those that need the most in a variety of different countries, whether they be in the EU or elsewhere. Like I said, as my job is in pharma, we prepare these types of applications to many, many different countries with many different rules and guidelines, essentially, to have the drug approved. And so this can provide, quite a barrier in some cases to a novel therapy, even if it works very, very well.
So if you were to have a call out, we have one sitting on the panel, to anybody else in the room that has the power to change these issues, what would you suggest?
Yeah, that would be of primary importance from my perspective, of course. So, some place like the GBA, which has certain very strict guidelines, versus trying to approve a product in Spain or France, UK, for instance. These are all different, and I'm not even mentioning the US right now, but making an infrastructure so that medications that are new and novel and have an unmet need can be approved would be, from my perspective, quite a leap forward.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course. I think it'd be wonderful to have your
some comments on the last. First of all, I'm humbled by the people here. So, but on the last thing you said about regularizing, at least there's an effort for the clinical trials to go to the EMA and then be okayed for all of Europe, so it doesn't have to go through the local. So those are small things; they take time. In terms of GPD, I'm an S&D, but I'm quite in favor of having the data that we collect used for the benefit of the citizens. And if you ask patient groups, they often are the ones who first want to give the data because they've gone through it. In terms of your special case, both patient and caregiver, one thing about the patient community that's in some countries like Cyprus is integrated in institutions, the brain health also needs the caregivers. It's a special case. It's not like you're walking around, and yesterday I was in a rare kidney panel, and he could go around and be a president of his group. But a person with a neurological condition cannot advocate so easily, depending on the case. So we need the caregivers in this special case of brain health to be part of that group. And you're actually both of them. So I'm very helpful. I'm very thankful that you're here. And what you mentioned is exactly what we're talking about in the health committees. And in terms of the data, yes, big question. I'm a little bit on relaxing the rules because, for instance, we have the new watches, trackers. Maybe there's 30 million Europeans with trackers. Can we use that data? So far, no. Can it be anonymous? Yes. Will it help especially for cardiovascular? Probably. Will we know the scanning of the citizen? Because on a final note, I feel like now that I've been in the health committee for a year, that we're these weak objects in our society, and we're attacked and seduced by all the things that make us sick, whether it's cigarettes, alcohol, lifestyle. And for me, that's a really difficult one to change, how we live, which lead to a lot of the health conditions. So the more I get into this thing, the more I worry. I really do think we have to have a major emphasis on health, brain health being part of the number one things, major emphasis on health. As you mentioned, Europe has that emphasis. We need to put it even higher because our society is going to have only more problems in the future. And you're here we're here. Of course, that's the crazy thing. The drug is to solve the problem of too much drinking or high pressure. So we drink, then we take the drug. We drink, we take the drug. And it's a little bit of a sick situation that we're stuck in. The same thing with AI and the children and mental health for children. Very attractive. There was actually a fine on TikTok by the EU for being too algorithmically addictive. Small fine, won't change it. Those are the things that Europe is doing though, and being actually, since I hear 3 American accents, I think, being, including mine, being criticized by certain administrations for being too interventionary in social media, which again is brain health. So thank you very much. I have to go to my economics vote. Sorry for that.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Just to close this panel, I wanted to actually just turn back to you, Gianpiero, because you're the Deputy Director for Future Neuro Research Ireland Centre. And something that we didn't have time to talk about on the first panel, but something that was brought to my attention, of course I know it, but it's having centres of excellence, the beauty and the power of having a centre of excellence, which is different from a university. So maybe you'd like to speak on this.
Yeah, look, I suppose traditional science is very much about the individual and a lab, whereas what a center can bring you is more, you know, collaboration across different groups that'll have different sets of expertise. And then, of course, an operations team that gives more broad support like GDPR, ethics, public engagement, business development, grant writing. So it's about creating a strong research environment that goes beyond just one lab to more of a collaborative setup. And certainly we in Future Neuro have found that fantastic. And in my own field, and I know this is quite field specific, that mentality of collaboration and merging data sets is fundamental in genomics. Certainly over the last 20 years, it's all been about putting data sets together, getting expertise from this group, a little bit from that group, and together analyzing the data to provide the most insights that we can.
Well, I think if there's one thing AI has taught us, it's that the amount of data we can have merged together, the better our results usually, depending on what the data is that you're inputting in the first place. So thank you all very, very much indeed. Thank you. Now, our next panel consists of Agnese Cattaneo, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Angelina Pharma. We have Gert Dom, past President for the European Psychiatric Association, Scientific Advisory Board Member for the European Brain Foundation. And with a wonderful flourish, we have Elena Moro, who is the President of the European Academy of Neurology. So please welcome all 3 to the stage. And Nikos, of course, has had to leave. So this is the last panel before we have just a final summary. So Agnese, thank you also for being one of the sponsors for this event. And I'm going to talk to you first of all about the role of industry. You've heard a lot from other people, but the role of industry is so important. Just joining the gaps up, we heard first of all the fundamental research, then turning it into crucial breakthroughs, into tangible health solutions. So this is what you're working with all of the time. Where do you see the bottlenecks?
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Lisa. So I guess that I have the privilege of summarizing some of the concepts already raised during this very interesting session. So basically, when we consider how Europe can be competitive in terms of research and bringing drugs to patients, probably from a pharma perspective, we go and think about how we can speed up the process in a way for a few reasons. And from a medical perspective, from a physician perspective, as I am, I think it has to do with really how much we can give back lives to patients in a way. So I feel that there are some enablers probably of how we can, in fact, foster competitiveness for Europe. So one aspect has to do probably still with the high risk of some research and long-term perspective. So recently we had the opportunity to enter the field of rare diseases and specifically for neurodevelopmental disorders in children. And that's definitely an area in which probably if some quite stable and predictable incentives would be there, they could help some of the in fact sponsors of this type of research. Then if I think again to Europe, obviously needless to remind to all of us how sometimes fragmented we are in terms of access to drugs, but also in terms of policies. And again, probably that's quite ambitious task, but probably something could be done there. I feel that with the Biotech Act, there is something which can definitely help, as well as with going forward a more harmonized approach. I think we heard from Kurt mentioning this and some other colleagues before me. And then ultimately, again, needless to remind, but still the complexity of our regulatory environment in Europe is not really helping. If we size a bit this with respect of how more competitive we could be, there are some recently issued data by EFPIA raising some concerning numbers in my opinion, because the percentage of European global studies share low down from 22% 10 years ago to 12% now, with obviously an increase in US and China instead studies, which it's a matter of fact we need to take into account. And the multinational approval, average time of approval in Europe is around 110 days versus half of that for US and China. Again, interesting as a fact. As a perspective, I found quite relevant and intriguing the exercise being done on considering if we were able to reduce of 25% the time of set of clinical studies and increasing, doubling the enrollment rate, we would be able to increase of 35,000 patients the access to drugs per year, and prevent 3 million sick days per year, which to me it's there in terms of need.
And money, because sick days means no taxpayers sometimes as well. So it all comes back in different ways. So basically it's about longevity and health and how to increase the health days. So then when it comes, you mentioned the Biotech Act, is there anything you would like to suggest that you would like to see in that?
That's interesting. So probably I link really to biotech. So one of the aspects in Europe we should foster, and unfortunately, I think a recent decision of the Commission not to prioritize biotech sector within the Industrial Acceleration Act is not really going into this direction. But I think that biotechnology in Europe could really be a trigger for competitiveness, I guess. And again, the aspects related to harmonization, I think they are really crucial.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Geert next, actually, because we had a little while standing in the sunshine before we managed.
It was delightful.
It was delightful, and you were the third person today who was very optimistic. Maybe it's the sunshine, maybe it's because we're all here gathered together. But you gave me one line, and you said your first line is, "Things are good." This is very good.
Yes, let's reflect and enjoy that. Just for a minute. Thank you for highlighting that. And because I was thinking, what can I add as a humble psychiatrist in this really very smart room at the moment? A psychiatrist who sees everyday patients. What can I say to help politicians to make steps towards developing a brain and a health and brain health plan? And yes, indeed, I think if you look to the data from the last Lancet Burden of Disease paper that looks to how is the DALYs evaluated over the last 30 years, it's quite amazing, because you see about a 12% reduction in DALYs worldwide. That means that we, as healthcare givers, can do something that is very positive. So,
or people are doing it by themselves.
and that's another thing, but that's a discussion for another moment, I think. But if we look what does drive that change, I think there's a lot to do about prevention, a lot to do about lifestyle, a lot to do about these important things. The dramatic side is a bit, if we look to the data in our fields, for example, mental health, it's quite dramatic. You see an increase of 60% of anxiety disorders over these 3 years, 60%. You see an increase of 23% of depression. You see an increase of neurological problems. So you see, there is optimism, but I think we on the mental health field and maybe on the neurology field are missing a little bit the train of fully implementing what we already know that works, to invest that in prevention or in targeted prevention. So I think there's so much that can be done and gained in highlighting and enhancing these fields. And for that, I think the concept of brain health is a so powerful concept because it's really close to the public, it's really close to what politicians need, and it's really very close and essential in the sense where you need this healthy brain. Healthy means not only disorder, but really healthy, that binds and that guarantees health, overall health, mental health, neurological disorders. So that's the line I'm thinking a little bit, but you have a question, I see.
I do, because you said we, meaning you, also have the answers. You have an actionable plan.
Yes and no. So thank you for highlighting.
You never said the no part to the outside. You just said the yes part.
I want to share the experience, and I'm super grateful for the Commission and the European community for having launched the initiative now 2 years ago in the communication of the Commission of this approach, coordinated approach to mental health, which funds a lot of 20 flagship initiatives, which are really much closer to the, let's say, clinical reality and are very much closer to prevention activities or targeted prevention activity and initiatives. So I find it very important. There has been said so much here, and it's so important about the collaboration, about the research collaboration, about the brain science, the neuroscience. But I would add a layer to that. And I think it's so important to start investing in developing for brain health. So in my dreams or my best wishes would be that the Commission took in consideration also the development of this coordinated approach towards brain health, focusing much more on this preventive aspect. And the last thing I say about it, and I think it's important, we should realize that still in Europe, only 0.57% of the GDP is given to prevention in healthcare. We should realize that. And a lot goes to cardiology and oncology, which is good. But I think we can learn, and I think we need to back our politicians. This needs to be raised because this 60% increase in anxiety or 25%, we're not going to treat all these patients. We need to prevent these things. So I would call on an extra plan on top of the neuroscience research, etc. So that would be my dream, Lisa.
Well, I hope your dreams come true, Gert. I really do. Elena, moving on to neurological health now, and it's become an instrumental challenge for the EU. I'd love you to tell us why it is so urgent, and particularly with various decisions needing to be made this year by the people in the room. Why is it urgent that Europe steps up its action?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. And being an academic physician, I really enjoyed the previous panel because I totally agree, and it's an exciting time. but this is the 50% of my time. The other 50% of my time is to receive people with a neurological disorder that are coming to the hospital as an outpatients or in emergency setting. So they need an urgent answer. I can say, well, no, we'll see in the next 10 years where we will go. So we need to an action now. So we need answer. We need to take care of them first, and you need to propose a prevention, but optimizing the care and be very effective. So this is the emergency now. We said that how many we are here in the room? If we are 100, 43% of us will have a neurological disorder. Good luck, because maybe you don't find a neurologist in the next 10 years, but also some of them, they have already started Alzheimer, Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis. So, but we simply don't know who and when now. So we can't say good luck, but we have to say we have to really have a strategic plan with a measurable goal, achievable goal, time-bound goals, short-term, mid-term, long-term, with a plan that have to be shared between all the people here. We are neurologists, but we need psychiatry, we need neuroscientists, we need pharma industry, we need everybody in the loop and the shape, and especially the European Parliament.
And so if you were to design that coordinated plan, you've obviously spent a long time thinking about it. How should it operate?
Well, we have already done. So the European Academy of Neurology represents 45,000 neurologists who are living and active in the European space, WHO, also European
And
space.
just to say, of course, neurology...
And we have a plan.
And yes, and we'll come back to the plan, but just as Arabella said, different countries have different levels of access.
Yes, but we have a plan also for that, because we have a common vision that we set up yesterday, actually, with the declaration. And then we ask each national neurological society to adapt this plan according to the diversity that we have in Europe, which is a challenge, but is also an opportunity.
Oh, that's a very good line. The challenges,
efficient,
the challenges that are opportunities as well. Well, Agnieszka, just turning back to you then as well. You've thought about coordination in different ways as well from the pharma point of view, and you've spoken about the difficulties of the fragmentation. So again, if you were to develop and design your perfect coordination plan, what would you get rid of that causes you problems?
Yeah, so let me first of all also, reflecting on this panel here, saying something about the cultural moment we are living today, because I think that if we think about coordination, we can't but consider that in the recent years, a number of steps from a cultural perspective towards brain health and not silos, psychiatry and neurology have been done. And I think this is the right moment. We should take the momentum on this, because in terms of coordination, I think there is a lot which could be pursued at this stage. So I guess that obviously in terms of resources and in terms of prioritization, it's not probably a super easy task somehow. On the other side, I think that from again, scientific and medical community, academic community, let's think about the brain health mission, and in parallel to from the other side and from a more policy side, the European coordination plan for brain. So in a way, there can be a parallelism now, which in the past was not that obvious, probably. And with regards of different stakeholders, I guess that once again, these sessions today are quite representative on how we all together can move these forward. Again, the fragmentation at country level generates also quite a burden, because we know that in terms of, and we heard about the within the patient perspective, how burdensome is not to find, you know, an appropriate ground to be treated, and the fragmentation in Europe. Again, there are some interesting data by the European Parliamentary Research Service documenting that beyond the economic burden per se, then when you go into rare conditions and pediatric condition, the diversity across countries emerges even more, with even a higher burden for families and communities.
Thank you, Agnese. Just to wrap it up and to come back to that word coordination.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi. Welcome to the stage. Well,
Maybe I was misinformed. They told me to come here, but maybe I was wrong.
you can stay. This is
Or I go there.
You can stay there. That's fine. You're up
there.
next anyway.
No, don't worry. It's your house.
Really, that's fine. You're very, you're very, very welcome to join the discussion. You're up next anyway, so you are on next, so you can just, as you wish. I was just going to wrap it up with one final thing. We were talking about coordination, and I wanted to turn to both of you, really, Elena and Gert, because as you said very rightly, we have now the coming together of what were different pillars when it comes to brain health. But as with cancer, you know, they came together and wonderful work has been done. We are seeing cancers being cured now. And that is the hope that a translation of great fundamental research can come into seeing cures. John spoke about it earlier. In his lifetime, he feels we are on the cusp, without making promises, you said, of seeing real cures, actionable cures. So when it comes to the coordination of conversation and talking together, how has it been for psychiatry and neurologists, for example, just two of the fundamental pillars under brain health, to talk to one another? Because you do speak a slightly different language.
It's like in a good marriage. The wife said, "You start, you do this, you do that." And I'm super happy, and I think to keep the marriage symbolic, I think the last years there has been a great coming together, I think, between our both societies, which is very important. I'm really sure of that. We will expand this. And we just follow science with that. Science that say, basically, you got the brain and then you got a lot of things that come around it, but it binds us. So I think there's great opportunities in building together these brain plans. I give credit also to the EBC. That keeps together also this, but between our both societies, I think we have a growing understanding, and I think patients know that also, with a growing understanding that basically there's a lot of communality. So there's a lot of opportunities. So I think we revived the marriage that maybe has been dead a little bit for a couple of years, but I think it's now alive and kicking, and I think we will create beautiful, nice children together. Elena.
Okay. Wow. No, I think what has been said for the previous panel is now the scientific understanding, the technology, they really suggest the strong support that the common mechanism sharing with the several mental and neurological disorder. And this knowledge help us to find a solution with the same burden that we were discussing. So this is a research level. Then we have to have a holistic approach and patient-centered care, and this is why we come together. So we don't treat diseases, we treat people with disorders, and having this comprehensive holistic vision of a person, an individual, from the, let's say, pure neuron transmission part, lesion part, and the personality, social, environmental, social, and psychological dimension really help us to serve our citizens, our people much better.
Thank you, Elena.
also towards prevention.
And prevention, that 0.57% of GDP that's seared into my brain. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, you already got a teaser of what's up next. So let's welcome back to the stage. We've got two MEPs for you, not just one, in fact. I believe there are two in the room. Well, there's more than two in the room, but two coming to the stage right now. We've got Tomislav Sokol and Aurelius Verga. And I know that you've got various points that you'd like to make on building a brain healthy union, fostering synergies across the EU, action, national strategies, and multi-stakeholder engagement. So that's a long title. What's your answer to that?
Thank you very much. So when we speak about health policy in the EU, first what's important to say is that it's not a traditional EU topic. And until the pandemic, until COVID and the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, it was really marginal thing here. That has changed, but now we have to keep the momentum. And up until now, the whole focus of health was on cancer. Then we were able to also include this heart strategy, Safe Hearts Plan, that was in the electoral manifesto, in the electoral program of my political group of the EPP. Now we have that. And I think next steps should definitely be about brain, because cardiovascular diseases and cancer are the number one and number two killers in Europe. But brain health is one area, and brain diseases are one area that is definitely, I would say, under-researched. We have enormous potential for growth, for development of new medicines, of new treatments, and here you can provide the added value. So you cannot decide how health systems will be organized, managed, and financed, but it can provide money for research, provide funding for gathering data. This is why we have European Health Data Space, and it can also, for instance, finance centers of excellence across Europe. These so-called European reference networks, they can be strengthened, where they share expertise across the EU. So in that area, research, development of new medicines, use of health data, EU can definitely do a lot. But if you want to actually do something, you know how they say. So if politicians like to say very different things and propose and promise a lot of different issues. But if you want to know what they actually really want to achieve, look at the budget. So what we need is concrete strategy, concrete plan with concrete objectives, concrete measures, concrete benchmarks to measure whether we are achieving these objectives, and we need strong funding to do that. And so this is why I think that that after the Safe Hearts Plan on cardiovascular diseases, next two main priorities should be about brain and rare diseases. So I think this is the area where the biggest potential lies, where EU can do the most. And this is why we need this strategy to do it as a political statement, but also to have concrete budget there to actually make it work. So I think that this should definitely be our priority in the next mandate. And now the next stage is that we will be working also on the so-called own initiative report in the Health Committee. That's a report which is not legislation, but which we will use to state what our priorities of the European Parliament are for brain health. And I think here definitely this report will highlight what we want to achieve, and we'll put the focus on having this strategy before the end of the mandate.
And what are your priorities for brain health?
As already said, so to have brain health as one of the priority missions for the New Horizon program. So to really have focus on research on brain health. I think this is one of the most under-researched area relating to health, and I think here we can do the most, and that the EU should definitely allocate much more money for funding brain-related research. We need to increase and expand the European reference networks related to brain health. So these networks of experts from all across Europe. We need to invest in national centers of excellence for brain health, which would pool the knowledge and expertise. And also we should make rules on cross-border healthcare easier so that patients also from small countries can access the most advanced treatments anywhere in the EU, including such centers of excellence.
I don't know if you were here earlier to hear the previous conversations. Right. Well, we had the usual conversations in some regards when it came to the fragmentation, the various rules between countries, which makes it hard for all sorts of researchers. It makes it hard for companies. So how can you fix that and make that one of the priorities also?
Some things we can harmonize, some we cannot. As I said, organization of health insurance, health system financing is a national competence. Here we cannot do a lot. What we can do, for instance, we can provide new rules on medicines. This is why we are now working on the so-called Critical Medicines Act, where I'm the rapporteur, where we have several main priorities. So one priority is to create this so-called joint procurement. So where different member states will be able to buy medicines together with the help of the European Commission. By doing that, we'll make most advanced medicines, for instance, for neurological conditions, available much faster and with a much more sustainable, I would say, price, also to small markets, which are usually not that interesting for the industry. So that's one thing where we can pull different member states together and really make medicines available much faster than it was until now. So that's one thing. The second thing is the Biotech Act, where we are working on the revision of the clinical trials rules. And one of the things will definitely be to make conducting of cross-border clinical trials, which will involve different member states, much faster and much easier than it is now. And the idea is to provide additional incentives for companies to conduct clinical trials in different member states. So also to include more countries, patients from more member states, etc. So here also definitely we can do a lot. And on health data, we create European health data space, which should make use of health data, of data sets interoperable, so that data can be shared from all different member states. Here, it will take some time to implement this. We'll again need funding from the EU level, but definitely having common standards on how data is gathered, how data is systematized and used, and how it is shared will definitely also help. So we are working on a lot of things, and I think that we'll definitely see concrete results at 2 or 3 years minimum.
Thank you. Aurelius, I know that you care deeply about this topic as well, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for invitation. And I was listening very carefully, not to all discussions, but at least 2 of them. And I have to say, being psychiatrist myself, that everything starts from understanding the issue and awareness. And I will start from the funny thing coming from Parliament, and then we'll go to serious ones. So Tomislav probably remembers the discussion in the plenary about mental health in working place, which was taking place as a last question in plenary at 10 p.m. So that was when I had an opportunity to speak. I told that it's a brilliant example of understanding of how the mental health in workplace is important. So yeah, but everything takes time and everything should start somewhere. So as Tomislav correctly mentioned, EU was not meant at the beginning to deal with the health issues, generally speaking, but probably the COVID clearly demonstrated that acting member state by member state, being alone, you cannot do a lot of things. And I believe that we somehow learned some lessons from the COVID pandemic, and the Beating Cancer Plan was one of the starts that I know that colleagues in the room, not everybody are happy how it was finally implemented or how it was at the end of the day, what was done, what not. And some colleagues and one of the colleagues, the psychiatrist, if I remember correctly, mentioned the importance of prevention. There are so many things could be done inexpensively, but just by having a wish to do that and understanding how it is important. But I believe that now it's a very good moment because Europe speaks a lot, not just about health, but about competitiveness. And when we speak especially about mental health, you correctly mentioned the anxiety disorders, the depression disorders going up in numbers. We don't know the reason, we can guess. There has been impact definitely by the pandemic, but there are other reasons for that. And this is exactly about competitiveness. Because when we speak about the union that needs a healthy workers in a workplace, it's about competitiveness. So it looks like it's just a health issue. But if you bring that in the right direction, it becomes a question of competitiveness. Then we all speak about aging societies. We all speak about the neurological disorders that takes not just the one caregiver, but usually half of the family or all of the family that might drop of the labor and need to take care about their beloved ones. So this is about the right moment to step in and connect the dots. And Tomislav correctly mentioned already a lot of initiatives that are overlapping: access to medicines, access to healthcare. And that's what the European Parliament is currently debating.
I can see, and obviously you're here because you're two voices that deeply care about this. You're deeply invested in this, and you can see that health also gives economic outcomes and benefits as well. But your colleagues, what are the difficulties you find with them in understanding, or are they all on board? Do they all believe in what you're saying?
I can start. No, I wouldn't be honest if I would say that, everybody cares about health at the first point. But it's not to blame anybody telling this, because, we are all coming from different backgrounds. We all have different experience in our life and even professional life. And it's very normal that we come together. And I'm very happy that in this parliament, the Sant Committee is a full-scale committee. It's not subcommittee like it was before. So it demonstrates that this parliament is one step already in a good way, in a good direction, in understanding health as an important issue. And it's up to us, those working in a committee, in the Sant Committee, to bring the message, to work with the colleagues, because it's the same happens when other colleagues are approaching us from other committees talking about, other important things, security, which we all agree it's an important point. And it will never ever happen that everybody will understand health topics on the same level. But that's, I believe, is a very normal thing.
And you also said that with the cancer plan that it was implemented, but not all in the best way possible. So are there any lessons learned from what happened there that could be changed to make better for a brain health plan?
Public health is the first thing that I believe was not really given enough attention, because we really miss an opportunities to prevent diseases. And some colleagues already spoke here about some elements, the behavioral changes, the addictions, the social networks and other things that we know for decades what can be done. The problem is that when the debate comes to the decision, then we'll find other more important, let's say, aspects of the prevention, and we push that aside. Well, here is the really low-hanging fruit. And a lot of things could be done in this direction.
Would you like to add a final word?
Okay, so about maybe on the parliament. So I think definitely having a separate committee on health was a major turning point. So one example, now we have the commission proposal for the next 7-year budget where there is no health program at all. So, and now we are without a separate health committee, this would have been dead from the start. But now, thankfully to the fact that we do have a separate committee, now we can put the pressure on other committees, on the commission, etc., to actually do something about this. And actually, it's going better than I expected. So now in some reports which are dealing with the 7-year budget, actually people, colleagues from other committees acknowledge the importance of having a separate ring-fence health budget. So actually, definitely our position and position of health is much stronger when we have this. Of course, in general, everybody says on declaratory terms that they're in favor of health. Health is important. But to really make it a priority, so we need to put pressure on this, and this is what I think this committee is doing, and definitely that's something that we see a real progress there. And on the beating cancer plan, I mean, yes, I mean there are some overlapping initiatives. I think the plan is the weakest in the area of treatment. So everybody speaks about prevention, which is important, early detection also important, but what you can actually do for treatment in terms of funding, in terms of providing centers of excellence, better cross-border healthcare, European reference networks, better coordination. So I think in the BT cancer plan, that's the weakest part, and I hope that when we make the brain health strategy, that we'll be able to put, in addition to prevention, which is important, but that to also have much stronger words and more concrete measures on the treatment as well.
Thank you both so much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you've been a very attentive audience, and just to wrap up everything, as Suzanne is going to wrap up 2 hours worth of conversation. You do this so well always, Suzanne. It's no small feat.
Speak too soon. Just a practical thing. I think the catering staff are setting things up at the back there, so there'll be a little bit commotion. So not to worry about that. If you can make space for them, that's great. Well, I promise not to keep you here till 10 p.m. And just reiterating and coming back to my introductory comments, you heard it from our MEPs. You know, the momentum really is building. The time is right to have action and improve research and improve healthcare in the brain space. We have two angles to motivating, you know, policy activities. One is to describe the burden, and we heard about the burden, and we've heard from patients, we've heard from clinicians. It's a societal burden, it's a cost burden, it's a healthcare burden. But we've also got much reason for optimism. In fact, we have reason for neuro-optimism, a new term that we've introduced today. I mean, we've heard right at the beginning that, you know, new advances in technologies are truly delivering key knowledge needs for understanding brain function, discovering mechanisms and advancing treatments and diagnostics. For neuro-optimism, we heard about AI, of course, and technology readiness. And the industry has an appetite to work with startups. And the research environment is ready. We have the skilled workforce here in Europe. We heard that the funding structure that we have works and delivers. Trusting the scientists in which we invest. We heard about new frontier research and its importance. And of course, not knowing what we don't know is a very good beginning. And then we moved to more policy asks, and I was scribbling these down. I'm sure this is a very limited number of policy asks, and I felt already reassured listening to our MEPs that these are already being discussed and actions are being taken. Of course, the GDPR compliance, and we need strong governance around European data space. We need improved and faster diagnostics, accessible treatments, and access to specialized services, much faster drug approval, and the importance of prevention. This is a societal issue. There are things that we can do other than giving people pills. And that healthcare then needs to become a #1 priority. And looping back to finance, of course, for all of this, we need money and we need help with our budgets in research and healthcare. Well, we've got plenty of fuel for our EU coordination plan for the brain, and much ideas also for our brain health mission. Today's been a great example of collaboration and cooperation. And I have two main takeaways from the meeting. So the EU urgently needs to address brain health with an overarching approach, breaking down silos and leveraging a community that is already working on solutions together. And secondly, this won't be possible without sustainable and predictable funding, improved prevention and early detection, and placing patients and carers at the centre. But the clear commitments from MEPs that we've heard about today demonstrate that they're really a source of hope for us and for the entire community. So I thank you very much, and thank you so much, Lisa. I mean, isn't she marvelous? And I thank all the speakers and for your participation today. Fantastic job, everybody. Thank you.